Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military with Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine, where during the previous 24 hours both the Russians and the Ukrainians continue attacking each other using drones. And we see that the total war between the Russians and the Ukrainians intensifies. So let's discuss these strikes in details. We have a lots of very interesting updates on this matter. According to information we have, during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians once again attacked the Chongar Bridge. I would like to remind you that 2 days ago, the Ukrainians attacked the Chongar Bridge using, according to information we have, at least 3 drones for these purposes. And this video was published yesterday. Here we can see how exactly the Ukrainians were attacking the bridge. As a result of attack, the Ukrainians managed to deal damage to this bridge, and the Russians were forced to close the bridge for at least a day. But yesterday in the evening, pro-Russian sources stated that the Russians allowed using this bridge once again, and as soon as it happened, the Ukrainians began attacking this territory once again. But this time, according to information we have, the Ukrainians began using dozens of drones with the purpose to destroy not to destroy and to damage not just the bridge, but also probably vehicles that were moving through this area. And as a result of attack, the Russians were forced to close the bridge once again, and the Russians were forced to move the logistic further in the western direction towards the settlement by the name of Armyansk. But the problem is that the city of Armyansk is located much closer to the territories under control of the armed forces of Ukraine, which means that Ukrainians have more means to attack this territory with drones and with missiles. And these days the Ukrainians began establishing a certain control over these territories as well. And today we received the report that as a result of attack, the Ukrainians destroyed a gas station on the territory of the settlement by the name of Skadovsk. And this video was published this morning. Here we can see that the gas station was damaged, not significantly, but damaged, and probably not even the gas station, but a vehicle that was located in this area. So here we can see that the gas station was damaged, and here we can see the moments when a vehicle was completely destroyed as a result of the FPV drone attack from the Ukrainian side. So as you can see, the gas station war continues. And these things means just one thing, that the Russians most likely during the next 24 hours will continue attacking the Zatoka bridge. This morning we received additional videos on this matter, and according to the author of this video, here we can see a moment when the Russians attacked the Zatoka bridge with the Iskander missile. I would like to remind you that Russians yesterday were attacking the territory of the bridge using bombs and missiles with the purpose to damage and probably even to destroy it. As of the morning of the 8th of June of 2026, we don't know for sure whether the Russians managed to stop the logistic through this area or not, but we know one thing for sure, that while the Russians are trying to destroy the Zatoka bridge, the Ukrainians have managed to damage the Chongar bridge, and the Ukrainians continue creating more and more bridges in the area of the settlement of Mayaki with the purpose not to depend on this bridge at all when talking about the logistics. Now let's move further and let's talk about Crimea. The Ukrainians, as we discussed, continue attacking the logistics of Russians in this area, and during the previous 24 hours we received additional videos about the situation with gasoline in Crimea. And according to information we have, the situation with gasoline in Crimea is unfounded frenzy, according to the spokesperson Peskov. This can be seen in a video of Simferopol this morning. Here we can see dozens of vehicles that were moving towards a gas station with the purpose to get their 20 liters of gas, of fuel. Another important thing is that the Ukrainians continue attacking the southern regions of Russia, especially the territory around the settlement of Krasnodar. I would like to remind you that these days the Ukrainians attacked several fuel tanks in the area of the city of Novorossiysk, and this morning we received additional pictures where we can see that the Russian fire teams still haven't managed to extinguish the fire in the area of the settlement, and according to information we have, the Russians still haven't managed to stabilize the situation around the settlement of Ust-Labinsk, which means that this region began suffering huge problems with fuels and have already begun suffering. And we start receiving first videos from the settlement of Krasnodar. Pro-Ukrainian sources began publishing videos where we can see civilians moving through the city of Krasnodar seeking for fuel, but according to information we have, there are currently some problems on this matter. Now let's move further and let's discuss the Russian strikes. As we discussed during the previous videos, the Russians always mirrors attacks that the Ukrainians carry out, and during the previous 24 hours we received reports that the Russians continue attacking gas stations, warehouses and ammo depots and logistics of the Ukraine as well. And the most important updates are coming from the settlement of PAVLOHRAD. Today we received lots of videos from this area. During these days, the Russians destroyed at least 2 gas stations along M30 road, and these videos and pictures were published by pro-Ukrainian sources. In this video we can see how fire teams were trying to extinguish the fire on the territory of a gas station. Here we have another video. Here we have a vehicle moving through this area, and here we can see that this gas station was completely destroyed as a result of attack. I would like to remind you that just yesterday we received a video from this area, and according to information we have, yesterday the Russians destroyed 1 gas station in this area, and today the Russians destroyed the 2nd gas station on the territory of the city of PAVLOHRAD along the M30 road. And I would like to remind you that currently the Ukrainians are trying to repel Russian attacks. The Russians right now are advancing in the direction of the settlement of PAVLOHRAD along M30 road, and currently there are very heavy clashes for the settlements of Mirnaya. There are very heavy clashes for the settlement of Sergeyevka, and the Russians are attempting to break through Ukraine's defense in the area of the settlement of Raipolye and Kolonia Mizhova. During the previous night we received lots of updates on this matter. For example, in this satellite picture we can see that the Russians intensified their artillery strikes at least in 3 areas. Currently the Russians are bombing and attacking the southeastern parts of the settlement of Raipolye. Currently the Russians, according to these satellite pictures, are striking and attacking positions of the armored forces Ukraine along M30 road and the southeastern part of the settlement of Kolonia Mizhova, and the Russians are bombing positions of the armored forces Ukraine in this area. So we can consider these artillery strikes like an artillery preparation before the beginning of a major offensive operation from the Russian side. It seems that the Russians are going to attack these 2 settlements with the purpose to force the Ukrainians to fall back further in the western direction towards the settlement of Mizhova. So it seems that the Russians are tasked to establish complete control over these territories, and this might be something like a breakthrough, because from these positions the Russians will continue offensive along railways further in the western direction towards the settlement of Mizhova, and the Russians may continue offensive operation in the northwestern direction towards the settlement of Sloviansk. This is a very dangerous front line for the armored forces Ukraine, because if Russians break through this defense line, then the Russians will be able to continue advancing further towards the settlement of PAVLOHRAD, and if Ukrainians lose control over the city of PAVLOHRAD, then the Ukrainians will lose logistics between the western and the eastern parts of Ukraine. Furthermore, this morning, lots of drones were recorded through the city of Dnipro. Local sources and local civilians published lots of videos where we can see dozens of drones flying over the city of Dnipro and the Dnipro region, seeking for a target. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the area of the city of Konstantinovka, where the battle for the settlement is about to be finished. During the previous nights we received lots of videos and lots of updates on this matter, and the most important thing is that lots of pro-Ukrainian sources confirm that indeed the situation in the area of the city is critical, and most likely in coming days or maybe even in coming hours the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back completely from the settlement, and the Russians would be able to establish complete control over the territory. Furthermore, during the previous day, the Russians improved their positions. I would like to remind you that yesterday the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation stated that Russians captured the settlement of Malocharka. Today, several pro-Russian sources clarified the situation on the ground, and according to additional changes, the Russians improved their positions further in the western direction towards the settlement, towards the northeastern parts of the city of Konstantinovka. Another important thing is that at the same time with with additional changes on the ground through the settlement of Konstantinovka, several pro-Russian sources reported that the Russians began advancing in the direction of the settlement of Drushkovka from the southwest. Today, several pro-Russian sources reported that as a result of clashes, the Russians improved their position significantly between the villages of Pavlovka and Novopavlovka, and the Russians took under complete control this tree line. And now, using this tree line, the Russians most likely will continue advancing further towards the settlement of Tarskoye, which means that the battle for this territory begins. And the Russians most likely will continue this offensive operation with the purpose to stretch Ukraine's defense between of the siege of Drushkovka from the southwestern and the southeastern flanks, where both directions are about to collapse. Now let's talk about the Sloviansk-Liman direction. These days we start receiving lots of updates on this matter. The Russians began their major offensive operation with the purpose to establish complete control of every single square kilometer to on the Russian side of the river of Seversky Donetsk. These days we start receiving more and more updates from different Western sources, pro-Ukrainian sources, about a critical situation on the territory of Liman. According to pro-Western sources, currently the Ukrainians control just 40 or 50% of the city. The rest of the city is either in the gray zone or under complete Russian control. And these days, which is the most important thing, we start receiving first changes on the ground, which means that the battle for the city of Liman are about to be finished. And when the battle is finished, the Russians will continue advancing further in the direction of the river of Seversky Donetsk with the purpose to cross the river and to establish a strong foothold on the Ukrainian side of the river right in front of the city by the name of Sloviansk. Furthermore, we received the report that the Russians intensified their artillery strikes in the area between the villages of Tatyanovka, Prishep, then further in the southern direction, Sidorova and Bogorodichne. So this territory is under very heavy fire from the Russian side, which means that this is also something like an artillery preparation. The Russians are attacking positions of the armed forces of Ukraine with the purpose not to allow the Ukrainians to counterattack or even to force them to fall back towards this big forest, and these artillery strikes will allow the Russians to establish a strong control between the rivers, between the river of Seversky Donetsk, and from these positions the Russians will continue advancing further in the direction of these big forests with the purpose to establish a strong control over this forest, with the purpose to have possibilities to control the city of Sloviansk with FPV drones and to have possibility to control the MO3 road. So as you can see, the Russians began their offensive operation from the northern and the southern flanks of the Sloviansk-Drushkovka agglomeration. The Russians attacked this agglomeration from four positions, from four directions: the Konstantinovka direction, the southwestern Drushkovka direction, the Liman direction, and the Svetogorsk direction. So from four positions the Russians are attacking the city and the agglomeration, and most likely in coming hours we'll start receiving additional updates about more attacks in the direction of agglomeration, but this time also from the eastern side. The situation is worsening in this area, but the Ukrainians still hold their positions, but the question is whether the Ukrainians are able to hold their lines forever, but most likely they will not be able to do this. Another important thing is that these days the Ukrainians are trying to attack the logistics and rear positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation right in front of the Sloviansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration. We continue receiving updates about the situation in the city of Alchevsk. During the previous 24 hours, additional explosions were recorded. Furthermore, additional strikes were recorded in the area of the settlement of Borivska. Here we can see more strikes that were carried out by the Ukrainians on positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. So the battle for Sloviansk-Drushkovka agglomeration begins, and the Russians intensify their offensive. Now let's talk about the southern Kupiansk direction. Several pro-Russian sources, more or less reliable, reported that the Russians are about to establish complete control over the settlement of Shivkiivka. There are very heavy clashes, and according to different sources, the village has been already captured by Russians, and the Russians began moving further deep inside of the southern Kupiansk direction with the purpose to take under complete control the Barova pocket. As you understand, there are still lots of issues, and different moments about the Barova, the southern Barova pockets. Some sources are saying that this pocket is under complete Ukraine control. Pro-Russian sources reported that they began their major offensive operation, but it seems that anyway, despite statements that were made both by Russians and by the Ukrainians, we understand that most likely sooner or later the Russians will continue or will start their offensive operation in this area with the purpose to establish complete control over the river of Oskol along between the cities of Izium and Kupiansk. It will allow the Russians to maintain flanks and to force the Ukrainians to fall back on the western bank of the river and to secure this territory from possible offensives in the future. As for the northern directions, these days the Russians bombed the city of Kharkiv significantly. The Russians attacked the city of Kharkiv and the city of Chuguyev, and the Russians attacked positions of the armed forces of Ukraine along the main lines of attack. As we discussed during the previous days, currently the clashes are already recorded on the territory of the settlement of Kozacha Lopan. Today this information was provided by pro-Russian sources. According to these sources, the Russians answered the northern parts of the settlement and the Russians continue advancing. Furthermore, yesterday we received a report that the Russians destroyed a warehouse along the line of a Russian attack in the area of the northwestern parts of the city of Kharkiv. We discussed this video yesterday. As a result of attack, a warehouse was completely destroyed. Most likely the Russians considered that the Ukrainians were using this warehouse to support their forces from the Kozacha Lopan direction, and today the Russians destroyed another industrial zone of the city of Kharkiv, also on the same line of attack, so in the northwestern parts. And these videos and pictures were published during the night, and here we can see what part of the city of Kharkiv the Russians were attacking through the night. Lots of videos, lots of pictures were published, and the Russians, according to information we have, destroyed this facility. As a result of attack, this industrial complex enterprise was completely destroyed, and most likely the Ukrainians were using also this industrial enterprise to support their forces in the Kozacha Lopan direction. So in coming days, due to these strikes and due to destruction of these two warehouses, we believe that the Russians most likely are trying to achieve a local breakthrough in this area with the purpose to finish the battle for the city of Kozacha Lopan as fast as possible. So this is probably the main target. The Ukrainians usually try to hold the lines for as long as possible. This tactics allows the Ukrainians to exhaust the Russians, and by the time the Russians take this or that settlement under complete control, the Ukrainians have enough of time to create a defense belt further along the line of Russian attack. So, but if the Russians are able to establish complete control over the settlement of Kozacha Lopan very fast, this can allow the Russians to break through and to continue offensive operation without huge resistance from the Ukrainian side. And this can allow the Russians to get and to approach the city of Kharkiv from the northwestern direction for as close as possible. Because if Russians are able to approach the city of Kharkiv, let's say till this level, this is going to be a very huge problem for the city, because from these positions the Russians would be able to begin bombing and attacking the city of Kharkiv with artillery and with FPV drones, which obviously will reduce the Ukraine's logistic capabilities through the northeastern part of Kharkiv region, where also Russians continue their offensive operation. Also, during the previous night, we had a report that the Russians attacked the city of Chuguyev. We have a Chuguyev airfield in this area, and we have several buildings that were completely reduced to ruins as a result of Russian attacks. We see fire teams that were trying to extinguish the fire, but it seems the buildings were destroyed. According to sources, several buildings that the Ukrainians were using for military purposes were destroyed by Russians, and at the same time, we continue receiving reports that the Russians continue offensive operation through the northeastern part of Kharkiv region. And these are the changes on the ground between the dates. We see that the Russians from this area are trying to encircle the settlement of Ambarne and to outflank Ukraine's positions, and the Russians continue offensive operation towards the villages of Grigorovka and Abukhovka, which will allow the Russians to encircle the settlement of Kolodizne from the north and from the south. So the Russians continue the northeastern Kharkiv offensive operation as well as the entire Kharkiv offensive operation, and in coming days we expect additional changes on the ground and reports published by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation. As of pro-Ukrainian sides, during the night the Ukrainians also attacked the territory of Russia, but the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation this morning stated that the Ukrainians used only 95 drones to attack the territory of Russia, and this is the smallest number probably since the beginning of the previous week. And that's it for today. The Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.